It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air is cool but not yet biting, and the leaves around my private lake were a mix of golden hues and deep reds. The water shimmered in the early light, reflecting the trees like a perfect mirror, only disturbed by the occasional ripple of a fish beneath the surface. I had just cast my line, my favorite fishing rod in hand, the one my grandfather had passed down to me, its worn handle fitting perfectly in my palm like an extension of myself. This lake had been in my family for generations, a peaceful sanctuary away from the chaos of the outside world, where I could sit for hours, watching the water and enjoying the quiet solitude that came with it. But that peace was shattered the moment I heard the crunching of footsteps behind me, fast and purposeful, breaking twigs and rustling fallen leaves as they approached. I turned my head slightly, not expecting company, but before I even saw her face, I already knew what kind of person I was dealing with. "Hey! Hey, you!" The voice was shrill, cutting through the morning tranquility like a knife. I turned fully to see a woman standing at the edge of my property, her hands balled into fists at her sides, her expression twisted with rage. She was in her mid-40s, maybe early 50s, with shoulder-length, aggressively dyed red hair that clashed with the earthy tones around us. She wore a bright green t-shirt with the words, "Meat is Murder," printed in bold, capital letters across the front, tucked into high-waisted cargo pants covered in various activist pins. I didn't know her, but I knew of her. The local town gossip had already warned me about Karen, the infamous vegan extremist who had moved into the area a few months ago. She had quickly gained a reputation for showing up at the butcher's shop and screaming at customers, slipping anti-meat pamphlets into grocery carts, and even tossing red paint on a few hunters' trucks. But this was the first time she had confronted me. I sighed, keeping my grip on my fishing rod as I turned back to the water, hoping that ignoring her would send a message that I wasn't in the mood for whatever crusade she was about to embark on. But Karen wasn't the type to take a hint. "You think you can just sit there and murder innocent creatures without any consequences?" she shrieked, stepping closer, her heavy boots crunching against the damp earth. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "Ma'am, this is my property," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You're trespassing." Her eyes narrowed, her nostrils flaring like an enraged bull. "Oh, I'm trespassing? What about them?" She pointed wildly at the lake, where a fish jumped out of the water for just a split second before disappearing beneath the surface again. "You're the one invading their home, terrorizing them with that torture device." She gestured at my fishing rod with disgust. What kind of sick, twisted person enjoys dragging a living being from the water, gasping for air, just so you can feel powerful? I sighed again, feeling the patience I had started the morning with rapidly slipping away. "Look, I get it. You don't like fishing. You don't eat meat. That's your choice. But this is my land, and I'm not breaking any laws by fishing in my own lake." Karen's face turned red, brighter than her already aggressively dyed hair. "Your land? Oh, how typical. You think just because you have a piece of paper that says this place is yours, that you get to dictate who lives and who dies? This isn't about laws. This is about morality. And what you're doing is murder." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Fish don't have property rights, lady. They don't pay taxes on this lake. I do." "How dare you?" she screeched, taking another step forward. "You arrogant, entitled, bloodthirsty monster. You think your disgusting hobby gives you the right to play God with their lives? These are sentient beings. They feel pain. They have families." I glanced at my fishing bucket, where a single bass flopped lazily, completely unaware that it had become the subject of an impassioned ethical debate. "Pretty sure this guy doesn't have a mortgage or a retirement plan," I muttered. That was apparently the wrong thing to say because Karen let out a guttural, rage-filled noise that sounded like a tea kettle about to explode. "You're a sociopath," she screeched. "A serial killer in training. This is how it starts, you know. First, you torture small animals. Then you move on to bigger ones, and before you know it, you're strangling women in dark alleys. I blinked. Lady, I'm fishing. You need to calm down. But Karen was beyond reason. Her whole body was shaking, her hands clenched so tightly into fists that her knuckles were turning white. I will not calm down while you commit genocide. Genocide? I repeated flatly. Do you even know what that word means? You're wiping out entire fish populations, she shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum. You're a monster, a murderer. At this point, I knew there was no reasoning with her. I sighed, turned my back to her, and reeled in my line, deciding it wasn't worth the headache. But as soon as I did, I heard rapid footsteps behind me, and suddenly Karen was right there, grabbing my fishing rod with both hands and yanking it out of my grasp. What the hell? I shouted, spinning around as she held it over her head like a trophy. You don't deserve this, she spat, her eyes wild. You don't deserve to wield a tool of suffering. You don't deserve to breathe the same air as the innocent creatures you slaughter. I took a step forward, my patience completely gone. Give it back. And oh, she screamed, gripping it tighter. You'll have to kill me before I let you hurt another animal. I exhaled sharply, trying to keep my temper in check. Lady, put my fishing rod down before this turns into something you'll regret. Karen's eyes gleamed with something unhinged, something dangerous. And then she dropped my rod on the ground, reached into her oversized cargo pants pocket, and pulled out a small pistol. Everything went silent, and that was the moment I realized this was no longer an argument. This was something much, much worse. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The pistol in Karen's trembling hands looked out of place, almost cartoonish, like a cheap prop in a bad action movie. But the way her fingers clenched around it, the wild gleam in her eyes, and the erratic rise and fall of her chest made it clear this was real. Deadly real. I felt a sudden, sharp coldness in my gut, a primal recognition of danger, but I forced myself to stay still. My eyes flickered between the barrel of the gun and her face, reading the madness etched into every twitch of her mouth, every bead of sweat sliding down her forehead. She was breathing hard, her knuckles white against the grip, her body trembling with adrenaline-fueled rage. Put the gun down, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. You don't want to do this. Karen let out a ragged breath that sounded halfway between a sob and a snarl. You're not going to kill another fish, she hissed, her voice shaking, but her hand steadying as she pointed the gun directly at my chest. I won't let you. I had to tread carefully. I'd spent my fair share of time around irrational people, drunken bar fights, heated arguments at town meetings, but this was different. Karen wasn't just an angry activist yelling at a stranger. She was a true believer, someone so consumed by her ideology that she had abandoned all logic, all rationality, and now stood on the edge of a cliff with no intention of backing away. I raised my hand slowly, not wanting to startle her. Karen, I said, making sure my voice was steady, you're not thinking straight. You don't want to hurt anyone. Her face twisted. I'm not the one hurting anyone, she shrieked, her finger twitching on the trigger. You are. You and your disgusting, murderous ways. You enjoy watching them suffer, don't you? You probably laugh while they suffocate. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I needed to de-escalate this, but the wrong move could send her spiraling. I don't enjoy watching anything suffer, I said, my voice slow and measured. I fish for food, for sustenance. I'm not doing this to be cruel. Sustenance, she screeched. That's what serial killers say. That's what war criminals say. You have a choice, and you chose violence. You could have picked up a vegetable, but you just had to rip a living being from its home. Her voice was getting shriller, her body shaking harder. But the gun remained firmly pointed at my chest. I could see the veins in her neck pulsing, the sheer effort of her fury exhausting her, and I knew I had to act fast before her rage turned into something irreversible. All right, I said, taking a slow step forward, keeping my hands up. Let's talk about this. You don't have to prove anything, Karen. You don't have to do this. Put the gun down, and we can figure this out. Stay back, she screamed, and I immediately stopped moving. I swear to God, if you take one more step, I'll. Her voice broke, cracking with something deeper than rage, fear. And that was when I realized she was just as scared as I was. I glanced down at the ground, at my fishing rod lying in the dirt, at the lake still rippling from the fish that had jumped earlier, at the world that had, just minutes ago, been so peaceful. How had it come to this? Karen, I said again, softer this time, this isn't going to help the fish. Shut up, she screeched, her finger fully on the trigger now. Don't talk down to me. Don't act like I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. You're the monster. You're the reason this world is dying. I exhaled, my pulse pounding in my ears. There was no getting through to her. And before I could say anything else, before I could even think, Karen's eyes widened, her breath hitched, and she squeezed the trigger. Boom! Pain exploded through my side, a hot, searing agony that ripped through my ribs like fire. The force knocked me backward, my legs giving out beneath me, and suddenly I was on the ground, the world tilting, the sky spinning above me. My ears rang so loudly that for a moment I couldn't hear anything else. Not the birds, not the wind, not even Karen's ragged breathing. Just the echo of the gunshot, reverberating through my skull. I gasped, my body seizing as the pain intensified, spreading like wildfire from the wound in my side. Blood, warm, thick, and terrifyingly real, was already soaking through my shirt, pooling beneath me, staining the dirt. My hands trembled as I pressed them against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding, but it just kept coming, seeping through my fingers like water through a broken dam. Karen stood over me, the gun still raised, her face frozen in a mask of shock. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't planned this. You... Her voice faltered, barely above a whisper. Her hand shook violently now, her entire body racked with tremors as she stared at me, at the blood, at what she had done. You shot me, I rasped, my voice barely a breath. Karen took a shaky step backward. I didn't mean... You shot me, I repeated, the pain making it hard to focus, hard to breathe. Tears welled in her eyes, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She was panicking, and then, suddenly, she ran. I barely registered the sound of her footsteps pounding against the dirt, the way her figure blurred as she sprinted back into the trees, disappearing into the dense forest beyond my property. My vision wavered, dark spots creeping into the edges of my sight, my limbs growing weaker with every passing second. I had to move. I had to get help. I clenched my teeth, forcing my body to cooperate as I rolled onto my stomach, biting back a scream as fresh pain tore through my side. Gritting my teeth, I dug my fingers into the earth, dragging myself forward inch by agonizing inch. My truck, my phone, it wasn't far, just a few feet, just a little further. The world blurred, my pulse hammering so hard it felt like my skull might split open. I reached for my pocket, my fingers barely managing to grasp the smooth surface of my phone. With shaking hands, I fumbled to unlock it, smearing the screen with blood, my vision darkening as I managed to hit the emergency call button. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was the distant, tinny voice of the dispatcher on the other end of the line. And then everything went black. The first thing I registered when I woke up was the steady beeping of a heart monitor. The second was the dull, throbbing pain in my side, a deep, persistent ache that made it hard to breathe. My body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish, my throat dry as sandpaper. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled my nostrils, mingling with the faint aroma of latex and disinfectant. I blinked, my vision adjusting to the dim lighting. A hospital room, white walls, and 4 drip in my arm. The rhythmic hum of medical equipment. It took me a few moments to piece together how I got here, my brain still foggy from medication. Then, like a dam breaking, it all came rushing back. Curran, the lake, the gunshot, the unbearable pain of a bullet tearing through my side. I sucked in a sharp breath, my muscles tensing involuntarily, and winced as fresh waves of pain radiated through my torso. "Easy there, pal," a deep voice rumbled from the side of the room. I turned my head slowly and found myself staring at a man in a dark uniform, a sheriff, late 50s, grizzled, with a thick mustache that twitched slightly as he studied me from beneath the brim of his hat. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent light. "You're lucky to be alive," he said, crossing his arms. "Another half an inch to the left, and that bullet would have shredded your liver. Doc said you lost a lot of blood before they got to you." I swallowed, my throat dry. "How long?" I croaked. "You've been out for 3 days," he said. "Emergency surgery went well, but you're going to need time to heal." I let that sink in, staring up at the ceiling. 3 days. 3 days since Karen shot me. 3 days since she ran. And then, the most pressing question hit me. Did they catch her? I rasped. Sheriff Donovan's expression darkened. He let out a slow exhale, shifting his weight. "Not yet." A rush of frustration surged through me, overriding the pain. "What do you mean, not yet?" The sheriff sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "She vanished into the woods after she shot you. We've had search teams scouring the area, put out an APB, even alerted state authorities, but so far, nothing." I clenched my jaw, rage simmering beneath the surface. Karen had shot me, nearly killed me, and she was still out there. "She can't hide forever," Donovan continued. "We'll find her. It's just a matter of time." I forced myself to take a steadying breath, though every inhale sent a fresh stab of pain through my ribs. "What happens when you do?" Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, illegal discharge of a firearm. You name it. She's looking at serious time, assuming she doesn't do anything even dumber while on the run. I gritted my teeth. She will do something dumber. She's not just angry. She's crazy. Donovan nodded. "Yeah, that's what worries me." A knock on the door interrupted our conversation, and a nurse stepped in, a warm but professional smile on her face. "Sorry to interrupt, Sheriff, but he needs to rest. The doctor will be in soon to check his vitals." Donovan gave me a small nod. "I'll be back later. If you remember anything else, let us know." I nodded, though exhaustion was already pulling at me. As soon as the sheriff left, the nurse adjusted my fore, fluffed my pillow, and told me to try and sleep. But sleep didn't come easily. Karen was still out there, and something told me this wasn't over. A dangerous game. The next few weeks were a blur of physical therapy, police interviews, and restless frustration. The wound in my side ached constantly, a dull reminder of how close I had come to death. I couldn't move the way I used to, couldn't fish, couldn't even go home yet because my property was still an active investigation site. And worst of all, Karen was still missing. The town had erupted with news of the attack. Everyone had heard about vegan Karen before, but no one had expected her to snap like this. Some people weren't even surprised. The butcher she used to harass had been saying for months that she was unhinged. The owner of the diner had banned her after she threw a bucket of fake blood at someone's steak. She had been spiraling for a long time, and now she was a fugitive. I sat in my hospital bed, flipping through the local news on my phone. The headlines were everywhere. Local vegan activists wanted for attempted murder, gun-toting vegan on the run after shooting fishermen, vegan extremists at large, armed and dangerous. Every article recounted the same details. The police had searched the surrounding forest, but no sign of her. They'd even put out a reward, $10,000 for any information leading to her capture. But she was gone. At least, that's what I thought, until the letters started showing up. The first one arrived at the hospital 3 weeks after the shooting. The nurses thought it was from a well-wisher, someone sending a get-well-soon card. But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a single sheet of paper, no return address, no signature, just one chilling sentence, scrawled in messy handwriting. You should have died. I stared at the words, my fingers tightening around the page. My pulse pounded in my ears, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Karen, it had to be her. I called the sheriff immediately. Within an hour, Donovan was standing in my hospital room, the note in a plastic evidence bag, his expression grim. This confirms what I was afraid of, he said. She's still in the area. My stomach twisted. She's watching me. Looks like it, he admitted. And she's not done. He wasn't wrong. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This time, the message was longer. You think you're safe in that hospital bed? You think they can protect you? I should have finished the job. You don't deserve to breathe. You are a parasite, a murderer, and I will make sure you pay. I handed the letter over to Donovan without a word. This isn't just some random threat, I said. She's planning something. Donovan nodded. We'll increase security around the hospital. But you need to be ready, son. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. I knew Karen was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her chance. And I knew, sooner or later, she was going to come back to finish what she started. The final confrontation. The night she came for me, I was ready. It was 3 a.m. when I heard the first sound. A soft click, like a door unlocking. My pulse quickened, my fingers tightening around the emergency call button. Then the shadow moved. Karen stepped into the dim glow of the hospital room, her hair disheveled, her eyes hollow and wild. She held a knife this time, long and gleaming in the low light. Time to finish what I started, she whispered. I didn't hesitate. With every ounce of strength I had left, I grabbed the lamp on the bedside table and swung. The ceramic shattered against her temple, and she let out a shriek, stumbling back. The deputy outside burst in with his gun drawn, just as Karen lunged at me again. "Drop the knife," he barked. Karen hesitated, just for a second, and that second was all it took. The deputy tackled her, wrenching the knife from her grip, and within moments, it was over. This time, there was no running. As they dragged her away, her crazed eyes locked onto mine one last time. "You haven't won," she hissed. But I wasn't scared anymore, because I knew one thing for sure. This nightmare was finally over.